All right, y'all. Real quick, I wanted to kind of go over this real quick before it started raining. But when it comes to pre-trip, everybody has their own way to do it. Everybody has their own kind of flow, right? So, so that's why when I posted saying to find yourself a flow, find yourself a flow. So right now, I'm gonna show y'all. I'm gonna just do the front of the truck because again, I'm trying to do this before it start raining. But here you go. So, zoom out. So for me, the way I kind of teach the students about their pre-trip is I tell them to again find yourself a flow. So I will start from the top, work my way down for the front of the truck, right? So clearance heights. Again, this is my flow, so again, your flow may be different. Figure out what works for you. So front of my truck is properly mounted, or my clearance height is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's no missing nuts or bolts. It's clean, amber in color, works properly. My headlights, my high beams, low beams are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. They're clean, not clouded over, clear or white in color, works properly. This part here, I call this my multifunction light, so that way it lets me know that it does more than one thing. So my multifunction light is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, no missing nuts or bolts. It's clean, amber in color, works properly. It functions as a left turn signal, right turn signal, four-way flashers, parking lights, marker lights, but the ones they really look for is just your turn signals and four ways. Then I'm gonna check under my truck to make sure that there's no puddles of any kind, to also make sure that there's no low-hanging lines, wires, or hoses. Then I'm going to check the seating level of my truck to make sure it's not leaning from one side or the other. If it is leaning, then that means I have low tire pressure or a suspension issue. For us, we tell y'all to, when you are opening your hood, you're supposed to maintain 3 points of contact from the front. If you cannot do 3 points of contact from the front, then you do 4 points of contact from the side. So basically 2 hands, both feet planted, and you just lift it from the side. There you go. Okay. Now, what I tell my students is, again, to pause, take your time, look at everything. Okay. Because of course this motor is completely different from that truck over there. Okay. This is a Cummins, there's a Detroit over there, 2 completely different motors. Okay, and this is a smaller motor, so everything's a little bit more dense, compact, and all that type of crap. So before you start, pause, do a once over, kind of look at where all the stuff is, so that way you can remember your flow. Okay, so for my flow for here, I start from the top, work my way down. So for me, I tell y'all to touch stuff, point at stuff, so that way you can remember what you're talking about. So my coolant reservoir on this truck, it actually says coolant. It is properly mounted and secured. Metal or hard plastic. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. Got to be secured somehow. There's no missing nuts or bolts. My caps are on tight, or cap is on tight. It is filled to the proper level, or some people, if you could say the manufacturer specifications, cool. A lot of people have trouble saying specifications, so you just say filled to the proper level. There's something in it, so if I put a hole in it, it could leak, so it's not leaking. So I say it again. Cooler reservoir is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. Caps is on tight. Filled to the proper level. It's not leaking. Okay. Then for me, I tell y'all to do what's called a general overview. Now, depending on your state, it could be different. So I'm gonna do a general overview. I'm gonna check all of my lines, wires, and hoses. All of my hoses are properly mounted and secured. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and not leaking. My wires or my lines is properly mounted and secured. It's not cut, torn, or frayed. Okay. Then I'm gonna go to my alternator. Now, depending on the truck, it may look a little bit different. It may look like a car alternator like this one, or it may look like a truck alternator with the little fans up there. An alternator is still an alternator. Okay. My alternator is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no missing nuts or bolts. It's working properly. It is also belt driven. My belt is properly mounted and secured. It's not cut, torn, or frayed. When pushed in the center, I should have no more than 3/4 of an inch of play. Okay. My water pump in this truck is about right up in here. Excuse me. My water pump is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no missing nuts or bolts. It's not leaking because there's something going in it, and it is also belt driven. Okay. My wash fluid reservoir, I know for us, is not technically on the test, but for me, the way I teach it is if you get pulled over by DOT and if you ain't got no wash fluid in your truck, you're probably gonna get a ticket. So I'll tell y'all to talk about it anyway. My wash fluid reservoir is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. Cap is on tight, filled to the proper level, not leaking. Okay. Before I go to the other side, I stop to do a once over to make sure that everything is good and all that stuff before I go to the other side. Pace yourself, okay? If you mess up somewhere, again, this is for our state, I don't know about the others, but if you mess up somewhere, you can always go back and talk about it. So if you missed your coolant reservoir, you can totally be like, oh shit, I forgot my coolant reservoir, I'm gonna go back and talk about it. Pace yourself, okay? As a truck driver, if you rush, that's where you start to mess up. So take your time and pace yourself. Cannot stress that enough. So once I get over here to this side, I do another general overview. I'm gonna check all of my lines, wires, and hoses. My hoses are properly mounted and secured. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, not leaking. My lines or my wires is properly mounted and secured. It's not cut, torn, or frayed. So my flow is I go from the back, forward, down, out. Okay. So for the back, now I know Texas is switching over to the modernization test. So some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here, you might not even have to talk about it anymore. Okay. But currently, this is what we teach our students until they come over here and teach us about the modernization part. But behind my firewall is my air compressor. My air compressor is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. It is gear driven and it is not leaking because air. Next, coming forward, I have my engine oil cap and my dipstick. Both of them are properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. My caps are on tight and they're not leaking. To check my oil, I'll pull this out, wipe it clean, put it back in, pull it back out, make sure it's in between, add in full. And that's it. So then after that, I start to work my way down because there's nothing else forward. None of this stuff here you got to talk about, at least for us. So again, I'll start to work my way down. So down, I have my power steering fluid reservoir. It literally says power steering reservoir. If it don't, follow the hoses to your gearbox. Okay. My power steering fluid reservoir is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. My caps are on tight. It's filled to the proper level. It's not leaking. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about my power steering pump. So over here is be like right up in there, about right there, give or take. My power steering pump is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. It is gear driven and it is not leaking. Next, we'll talk about my steering shaft, steering column, steering rod, whatever you want to call it. It is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. It has no more than 10 degrees or 2 inches of play. My U-joints, top and bottom, are also properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts, and they're free from debris. My gearbox, or power steering gearbox, power steering box, again, whatever you want to call it. My gearbox is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. It's not leaking because there's something going in it, and that's it. Pitman arm. I have no easier way of saying a pitman arm, but pitman arm. Pitman arm, drag link. My upper, lower control arm, and my tie rod. All of those are properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no missing nuts or bolts. They're all secured by castle nuts and cotter pins. Okay. My front and my rear spring hanger, they're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. I like to say no illegal welds for those, because if that shit's snapping too, you know, go up the street paying $40 and he'll weld that shit back together. My leaf spring, some people say spring leaf spring, springs, it don't matter how you say it. Leaf springs, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. They're not shifted or scissoring. Some people add on to it saying that, you know, it has no more than like a 1/4 inch of a crack and all that stuff. This motherfucker crack of getting it fixed, so I don't even say all that. But, you know, it's not shifted or scissoring. Okay. My U-bolts. Okay. You joints move, you bolts don't. Okay, my U-bolts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. None of them are missing, and the lug nuts at the bottom are secured. I have my shock absorber, hydraulic shock absorber, again, doesn't matter how you say it. The shock absorber is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken, no missing nuts or bolts, and it is not leaking. Okay. My brake hose, ABS line, they're both properly mounted and secured. Brake hose has no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. ABS line is not cut, torn, or frayed. My brake chamber is properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. It's no missing nuts or bolts. It's not leaking. It's secured by a clamp. This clamp is also properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's working properly. My slack adjuster and my push rod. The slack adjuster, this little piece right here, is the push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod is properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked, bent, or broken, no missing nuts or bolts. They are secured by pins and keepers, or you can say clevis and cotter pins, but you know, there's a lot of words saying clevis and cotter pins, so I'm probably just going to say pins and keepers. Okay. Next, we're going to go in, depending on your truck, if you have drum brakes or if you have disc brakes, you'll be able to tell based off of this slack adjuster and push rod. If you have disc brakes, you will not see this. If you have drum brakes, like we do, you will see this. Okay. So my brake drums is properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. They are free from oil, grease, and debris. My brake shoes, which is the tip right there, and my brake lining is properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. They're also free from oil, grease, and debris, and they're not worn dangerously thin to less than 1/4 of an inch of thickness at the smallest point. It's a lot of words, but you can also just say it's not worn dangerously thin to less than 1/4 of an inch. That's it. Okay. Tires. My inner towards the truck, outer away from the truck, facing my tire. All of them are properly mounted and secured. There is no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they are not leaking. The face of my tire is worn evenly and is not worn to less than 4/30 seconds of tread depth. Some people say 4/32, 4/30 seconds of an inch. It don't matter. Okay, so 4 is always in the front because this is the most important part. These are the most important tires. They don't give a damn about the rest of them tires. Okay, everything else is 2. These are 4. Okay. Next, I'm talking about my rim. My rim is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked, bent, or broken. It is not leaking, and there is no illegal welds. My lug nuts. Lug nuts are properly mounted and secured. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. None of them are missing or loose, and I have 10 of them. To see if they are loose, I would see rust trails or shiny thread. Remember, rust trails is the one that's exposed to the elements. The shiny thread is the one that is not exposed to the elements. Next, I'm going to talk about my hub oil seal, oil seal. Again, does not matter. My hub oil seal is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, no missing nuts or bolts. It's not leaking. To check if it was leaking, or to check my oil pressure or oil level, take this cap off, stick my finger in, make sure I have enough oil, or make sure that it's filled to the proper level. Next, I'm going to talk about my, I had a whole brain fart. My valve stem. Valve stem is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. My cap is on tight and it is not leaking. To check my air pressure, I'll take this cap off, use a tire gauge. It should be around 100 psi, or it should be around the manufacturer's specifications. Okay. Excuse me. So once I'm done, I go back. Okay. I tell y'all to double check, triple check your stuff.